When I heard about Boston, I was there the first night for the planning meetings, and I've been awake ever since.
Starting at the very beginning, I'm seeing thousands of people in different places, with the same message, using the same hand signals, really, with this, going at the same thing. And that's the way I saw it from the ground. I know from the outside, a lot of people may have not seen that, but on the inside, standing in the middle of 10,000 person marches in Oakland, Seattle, it felt like a revolution.
I think, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek. You hear a lot. It's a movement that started, that was helped out by Twitter, was helped out by the internet, and that's true. But there's a lot of depth there to it. And I think when we look at how Occupy moved around the country, how it's spawned in Boston, just less than 2 weeks after New York, and then across the country in the days after that, around the beginning of October, this is not something that just happened by smoke signals. I mean,
I went to about 7 other cities, from Miami, DC, Baltimore. I went Philly. I wanted to see what was going on in the sense that, what these all had in common, what they had different issue-wise. And one thing that I really saw was, and I don't know if this still applies, but if you wanted to see where Boston was going to be in a couple weeks, check out where Wall Street was, because they started 3 weeks ahead of time. If you want to see where Baltimore is going to be, in a week, check out Boston, because they started a week behind.
What a lot of conservatives are saying, they're all young and spoiled and rich kids or whatever. And sure, of course there were people who met that description. But there were also a lot of union workers, for example, who hadn't worked in a long time. A lot of homeless veterans, really. And it's a big part of my book. I'm in Seattle hanging out with some homeless veterans, and that was also the case in Boston. There are a lot of artists. There are a lot of just people representing every group imaginable. And it comes out. I mean, I was in the camps talking to these people, and a lot of that color is in this book, and I think a lot of it was lost in a lot of the mainstream coverage.
My second wave of trips came when the police brutality really heated up. As horrible as shit got here and in Boston and on the East Coast, what was going on the West Coast was it was a whole other beast altogether. But they're really brutal out there, man. I'm talking about indiscriminate pepper spraying of entire crowds of people, peaceful protesters sitting in the street, just getting blasted with, there are some videos that are they're more ridiculous than they're brutal. So, for example, 30 marchers just marching down the street, and a cop just drives by on a bike, breaks out a thing of pepper spray, and just splashes the crowd with it. These are things we didn't really see on the East Coast, so I broke out. I went out there and I saw what was going on.
Campaigns? No, there's a real disdain for electoral politics among occupiers. In 12 cities that I went to, I saw not one person registering anybody to vote. But you are going to see them participating more directly in the political process.
At the New Hampshire primary, it didn't get a lot of press, and I'm not trying to scream media conspiracy, but I was one of the only people outside really covering the protests. I mean, these were significant protests. Newt Gingrich couldn't even think. He was fighting. The media was laughing straight at some of these people. These were really effective protests in New Hampshire.
Has this movement made much of a difference?
I mean, there's the cliche, everyone's saying, it's affected the dialogue, and of course it has. We see it everywhere, from speeches that the president gives to what bills are actually being tabled, what bills are being ignored for the time being. Also, one thing I like to point to is Bank of America took 2 big lumps last month. They settled there's a settlement that went through for millions of dollars for people who had been charged overdraft fees in the early part of the 2000s. They also did not go forward with a surcharge fee that they wanted to. Bank of America doesn't really take lumps for the most part. And I think a big part of that is that whether it's a judge or a CEO, we haven't seen golden parachutes the way we were seeing them. I think there are a lot of people that don't want 2,000 protesters showing up at the courthouse.
And that's that, in the least, I've just seen a lot of young people become interested in a lot of issues that they really, not necessarily radicalized, but definitely are not so apathetic. And I think every generation has that. I think that the Vietnam War spurred a generation of activists. I think the anti-nuclear movement did a similar thing, and I think that every generation needs to breed a group of people who are going to protect oppressed people, and that's what I definitely see going on here. So
these are tomorrow's teachers. These are tomorrow's social workers. Every generation, and I think I've said this on the show before, every generation needs really something to kind of spur a lot of people into these kind of service professions. And I think that, in the very least, Occupy's already really invigorated a lot of people in that regard.
In any of these cities where the police just kind of swarmed in, this is the message that they're sending, is that we're not going to have it. But of course, you know, these people have a lot of will.
Yeah.
And they're not taking no for an answer. They're not going away. And that's why this is going to be a pretty brutal spring.